Hello everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing my tier list for patch 11.3. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. Starts around 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time every night. Usually goes till about 3 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. I'm happy to talk with you about anything that you want to talk about, and I try to explain as much as I can about the game while I'm playing. And then we also do fresh tier lists and patch notes for each patch, and I'm constantly adding more champion guides and topical guides like best one tricks, how to micro better, how to macro better, what is dodging, does toxicity exist in League, and tons of other topics, so be sure to check all that out. And let me know in the comments what you think about this new format. I'm going to try to do a more traditional, big visual tier list here, and I'm going to try to do it as fast as I can. I know it's a meme on the channel, but I'm going to go through really quickly. So check out the individual champion guides if you want to know more details about these champions, or come by and ask me on the stream what I think about them. But I'm just going to be focusing on sort of the biggest changes in the meta and just really briefly trying to hit on some of the big stuff here. So in general, on 11.3, I will say I am recording this before the official patch notes, so it's possible that there could be a really big shift, but I'm going to try to do a patch notes for every patch for each role just like this, aim for 15 to 20 minutes, and so I'm going to have to start releasing them before the official patch notes come out, just so that I can actually get them all done in a timely manner, because I know people want to see them within a couple of days of when the patch drops. So anyways, let me know what you think about this new format. So really quickly, the stuff that I think is going to impact ADC the most is there will be a little bit less armor off of the dead man, so it's possible we see less Udyr, less Skarner, less Darius, but I doubt it, so tank breaking could still be useful in there. Ravenous Hydra is going to affect Ezreal if he wants to get that third. He can still do Blade of the Ruined King third if he wants instead. Frozen Heart, if more supports pick up on this could actually be kind of detrimental to AD carries. I think it will be good on champions like Leona, like Nautilus, who really want that mana and are going to love the reduced cost, but whether or not, the actual public is going to be getting these upgrades, I doubt it. I think it'll be a slow adoption process. Not a lot of people talk about support or what to do, except for me, so be sure to check out the support tier list. But I don't think people are going to shift over that. Likewise, I think that Chemtech Purifier is going to be slow for people to adopt. A lot of people are still on Enchanters, just going to be doing Moonstone, Staff of Flowing Water, because that's what LS tells them to do. So you may not have to worry about that, but if people start doing more Putrefier stuff, then that will hurt some of the Shield Bow champions, most notably Samira, because she doesn't have a lot of alternatives. And then there might be some other Shield Bow champs, maybe Jhin or something like that, if he goes back to Shield Bow occasionally. Might get hurt by this, but I don't think it'll impact the meta too much. Phantom Dancer is interesting. I don't know anyone who's going to want this. Maybe Vayne. It's really hard to figure out where this would fit into builds over other things. They're taking away some of the attack speed and they're adding on attack damage. I don't know. I don't think it's going to matter that much. Now, Lord Dominic's Regards, I think, is actually going to be a very big deal for caster AD carries who can fit it into their build. So the biggest ones that I think who'll be wanting to do this would be Misfortune, maybe as a third or a fourth item, Jhin, and I think that's pretty much going to be it. Maybe Senna fits this in there too, but adding an extra 10% armor pen to this item is going to be really good. I think this item is already pretty overlooked. A lot of AD carries are getting Mortal Reminder just because the Grievous Wounds is really important, but if your supports actually start taking Oblivion Orb, maybe if you ask them nicely, they'll get Oblivion Orb, or if your mid laner gets Oblivion Orb, then you really don't want to get Mortal Reminder, I don't think. This is going to be so much more damage, and it's so good on champions that have, once again, those abilities that do that damage, like Misfortune's ultimate, her Q, Jin's grenades, Jin's ultimate. Senna just has a lot of hard-hitting crits and abilities, so just any champion that doesn't care that much about attack speed, that primarily scales off of their ability damage, is really going to love this, because the extra 10% pin is massive. It's already 100% efficient, and that's not even including the Giant Slayer. So when you start combining this with something like the Collector, which they still haven't nerfed for some reason, you're going to be hitting like a truck, because both of them have crit, both of them have armor pin, and the percentage pin of where Dominic's applies first, and then the lethality applies after that. So that makes the lethality even more valuable on something like the Collector. And then it also has the Giant Slayer, which is, basically like extra lethality, right? You're doing a higher percentage damage, which is going to get them lower, which means that you're more likely going to be able to collect them once they get below that 5% health threshold. So I think that you could start seeing builds where you see Lord Dominic's as a third item, where you get a Mythic, then you get the Collector, then you get Lord Doms. And this is going to be most dominant, once again, on the champions that have heavy AD abilities. So that they do a lot more damage off of those abilities. So I think this actually could be pretty meta shifting if people actually pick this up. Now, getting a third item in games, sometimes that doesn't happen because games are happening so fast. But I think that could be a really big deal on those champions. And then I think that's pretty much it here. Eclipse is getting... The Omni Vamp is weaker, but the shield is stronger. So I'm not sure. I think that's kind of a wash, maybe slightly weaker. But if anything, that might affect Jhin. But a lot of AD carries aren't really getting Eclipse. I guess you see Misfortune sometimes getting Eclipse. So bigger shield, but less lifesteal. So that's going to help you against Burst, but it's not going to be as good against Sustain, especially in the laning phase. This stuff in general is going to be good for Olaf, or for AD carry. So Olaf getting nerfed, and things like Gore Drinker and Ravenous, and just a lot of stuff that Olaf wants getting nerfed is good. And that means that your immobile AD carries might be a little bit stronger, so you don't have to rely on the mobility of something like a Vayne or a Kai'Sa to be able to kite the Olaf out anymore. So you might see some of these stand and fire AD carries get a little bit more play. So stuff like Senna, stuff like Ashe, stuff like Jinx might like that a little bit. I think that's about it. Seraphine is getting a nerf. I still have her on the AD carry tier list. She's my only non-traditional AD carry who's on there. I still think she'll be fine in terms of power level. They aren't hitting Moonstone. They're barely touching Staff of Flowing Water, so I think she'll still be a decent pick situationally if you have the right kind of team comp. We'll talk about that here in a second. And everything else I don't think is going to matter too much. Ezreal is getting a little bit of extra AD ratio. Don't think it's going to matter. He's mostly gated by skill. If you're really good on him, he's a decent champ, but he's extremely difficult to play at an optimal level. And that's it for that. Let's go ahead and get into the tier list here. So I think that Misfortune is going to be number 1 overall right now. She's so easy to play. You don't have to worry about your positioning too much. You can always run back, channel her ult. It's going to do a ton of damage. Synergizes super well with the Collector. Is going to do very well with Lord Dominik's. So there are just a ton of items that are very impactful, very effective on her. Not a great user of stuff like Kraken or Shield Bow. You know, she can use Gale Force, which is what she'll probably still use, just to reposition and just to be able to execute. And if you want to change the geometry of your ult, you can do that. There are lots of YouTube videos. If you don't know that, you can use Gale Force and then buffer your ult to get a much wider ult. So you have a bigger spread in team fights. That's kind of like some higher level stuff, but it is an option for you if you want to do it. But yeah, it just has a great ultimate, excellent scaling, tons of team fight damage, great assassination potential. If you get really fed, you can just use your E on someone. If they don't have a flash or a dash, you just press R and they're pretty much dead. And she combos really, really well with a lot of the other supports out there. Because if you just put that slow field on them with your E, it's a huge range. It's like 1,000 range on your Make It Rain. And that pretty much guarantees that your Nautilus is going to hit his hook, your Leona is going to hit her ult, your Thresh is going to hook, Blitz is going to hook. All of these really dangerous, hard engaged champs are extremely good with her because she sets up their engage so well with her E, and then she has that extremely good, very long range follow-up with her ultimate that's on a short cooldown. So she just combos exceptionally well, and she's a very good, excuse me, lane bully, because she can use those bouncing Qs to do an excellent amount of harass in the laning phase, has decent push with the Make It Rain, and she has very good movement speed with her W, which allows her to take very good timings so she can get her items, rotate back to lane really quickly, rotate around a fight. She can help, defend your jungle, invade, rotate over to mid lane, just really quickly catch and clear out a side wave and then get back with the team before the enemy has time to capitalize on your positioning. So she's just really, really good in a lot of situations. Highly recommend playing her. Super strong. Going to get stronger with Lord Doms. Jhin, I still think is going to be a real powerhouse champion. Now, he has been nerfed indirectly several times. Gale Force is still strong on him. Shield Bow is getting changed on this patch. So that little buff could be useful on him if you're against assassins in some situations. Eclipse is getting changed. Don't think that's going to matter too much on him. I still think he's probably going to be Gale Force, then Collector. And I also think that the Lord Doms is going to be good on him as well. And remember, they changed this during, at some point, either last season or during the preseason. It's not bonus armor anymore. It is total armor penetration. So it is still going to be a pretty decent item, even if the enemy doesn't have that much armor to begin with, especially, once again, if you combo that with lethality items like the Collector, then I think that can be really good. So he's really strong on 1, 2, and 3 items. Pretty simple to play compared to a lot of other AD carries. I think you do have to hit your W skill shot, which is the biggest thing, and hitting the ults is nice. But you don't have to worry as much about positioning because you do so much upfront damage that you don't have to worry about, like a 10-second fight and constantly repositioning. You just blow up somebody and the fight's won a lot of times. And you're able to take Boots of Swiftness and reposition really well if you have to, with your crits because you get all that extra movement speed. So I still think he's going to be great. A lot of burst damage, lots of utility, great follow-up, kind of like Misfortune with a lot of these champions, like your Leonas, your Nautiluses, all of that. If you root them with your W, should be a very easy engage and clean up for your support. So just works really well with the, hyper-aggressive engage supports that are still going to be very powerful in the bot lane. So Jen, I think, is still going to be really strong. Now, I will say that Lord Doms is going to compete with Infinity Edge, and I didn't do the math on that. I forgot about it. I meant to do it before this, but I'm sure Freak will have the math for you when he comes out, but I'm not really sure if Infinity Edge or Lord Doms would be the best third item, and you do want a Mythic in there somewhere on these champions. I mean, I'm halfway tempted to just say if you just went Collector, Doms, Infinity Edge, then maybe that could potentially be better than some of these Mythics because, what kind of Mythic do you really need on Misfortune, to be honest with you? Like, Shield Bow's not great, Kraken's not great, Gale Force is okay, so that's the one thing about Lord Doms is maybe it's competing with Infinity Edge. And once again, I don't know the full math on that, but I would say that 35% armor pen on some of these champions because you're still getting the crit, you're just not getting the crit modifier. It does have less AD, but it does have the 15% extra damage as well. And it's a lot cheaper. It's 500 gold cheaper. So I would venture to guess it's possible that Lord Doms is going to be stronger than Infinity Edge, maybe at least against tanks. And I think even against medium armor targets, it's possible that it could be a better choice than Infinity Edge. Now, once again, don't have the math for that, but it could be good. If you do get Infinity Edge third, then Lord Doms would probably be like a really good fourth item. But anyways, I think it's great on those champs. Speaking of champs that have risen to prominence in the last few patches, Senna really caught me off guard here. She did get a lot of buffs. I just thought that that they weren't going to be as meaningful for the AD carry role because the extra souls really are more of a support Senna thing because you have to not kill the minions in order to get those extra souls. But it turns out that it's really, really good on Senna as well. So she finally has like a decent build. One of the big innovations to her that was like low-key, very powerful that I really dismissed and didn't think was that big of a deal is the Kraken, and that her Q applies a Kraken stack now. They changed that just as of last patch, so if you auto-attack, Q auto-attack, then you do get that proc. So now she finally has a Mythic, because before this, she didn't really have a Mythic that was that great. Eclipse was okay. And, this item's not really, like, completely taken over, but it is nice. And you can still go Eclipse if you want to. Collector is still going to be very strong. Now, a lot of people have been doing this Ginsu's Rageblade build, and I'm not 100%, like, exactly why this would be strong. I know that it does interact with her passive in some way, so I'm not sure, but it does have a good win rate on it. So I don't know. Dustblade's okay. So there are several different items that can be decent on her, but she just brings a lot of utility to the table. She's a great early game bully if you use her range correctly and if you're gaining the souls. That's why I almost knocked her down to tier 2, because she is harder to play in the early game, because you have to maximize her. She's like just a much better version of Caitlyn right now, which is why I have Caitlyn further down in D. We'll talk about that in a minute. But she just brings a lot of utility. She's got the healing lane, like ultra long range harassment. She can get that slow off of the blue tree, blanking out on that right now, glacial augment. So she does bring a lot of the utility to the table. She has her ultimate for the AoE damage and shield, which is very handy. She has her shadows, which is really annoying to deal with. It gives the extra speed to get away, and then people can't target you with some of these point-click targetings. So that is pretty nice. Like a Zed or something is going to have a really hard time jumping on you if you're in those shadows. And then she has her W, which, once again, like these other two, pairs very, very well with a lot of these hard engaged champs. If you hit them with a W, then the Leona or the Nautilus or anyone follows up, then they're easily able to convert those into kills. So excellent pressure early. Very, very strong later, especially against squishier targets. She does have a hard time taking down tanks later. Kraken could help out with that. It looks like a lot of people don't get Kraken on her, although I think it would be a very strong item as like a third or a fourth item potentially on her. Now, it might be better than Infinity Edge because she gets modifiers with Infinity Edge that aren't that great. And I don't think that's even on anyone's radar right now, Kraken. Maybe there's some reason that I'm not thinking of why that's a really bad item. So third, it has like a 53% win rate right now. So it is lower than some of the other ones. Although fourth, it's actually looking pretty decent. But these buffs will certainly make it a little bit more attractive. But anyways, lots of utility, great harassment early. You really do have to take advantage of her range and get those souls. But even if you don't, at least you have some utility later with your slow, with your shadows, with your ultimate. At least you can do something if you're bad. Now, she does not take Barons very well. So keep in mind that your Baron will be much, much slower. Jhin doesn't really do that super well either. So it is one of the knocks on these kind of like hard caster, like slow attack speed champs that they don't take Barons. But otherwise, they are going to be pretty strong in a lot of team fights. And then Kai'Sa, and to be honest, I almost felt like knocking her down a tier just because she feels so bad in the early game, but she is a hard skilled champion, and if you are good on her, she does pay off, and she does scale super well into late game, so even if you fall behind, even if you're not the greatest on her, just her raw numbers are going to be very strong. There's a lot of different items you can go on her. I think most people have been doing the Gale Force into Collector, although you can also do Kraken into Collector with Hail of Blade. So she has several different builds. She can adjust to situations very well. Then she can do Hurricane, or she can do, Infinity Edge at some point. I don't know if Dom's is going to be that great on her. It'll probably be all right, but some of her damage is mixed. She does have some magic damage in there as well. But the one thing that, I think makes her way better than Vayne, and they have a similar win rate, but that Kai'Sa does have those isolation missiles, so she can actually trade if you get the isolation right. If you clear out the wave, and then your Leona is able to engage, and you get those open field missiles early on, that can be very good. And she's very good at YOLO Q, where she's able to ult in, and clean up a lot of fights where people have already been heavily damaged. So that is nice. She can reposition. She does get that big shield, so she does have the invisibility whenever she dashes at a certain point in the game. So she has a lot of tools. She just remains a very close range champ, and she requires a lot of auto attacks unless you hit your W or get those isolated Qs. But she is very strong if you don't get completely blown out in the early game. So I think that she does deserve S tier. Although, once again, I think these champs, if they're played well, can play into her really well in the early game. But she's still going to be really strong. And then Ashe is another one that we're moving down just a little bit, but I think that Ashe is still going to be quite strong right now. She has the arrow for the engage, she's got the slow, she has the hawk shot, so she just still has a lot of her utility out there. Now that Olaf might move out of the meta a little bit, that's going to help her out. She can still use Kraken. I guess that she does shield bow sometimes too. I'm not really sure. There's not a fantastic mythic on her, but she just has like a high baseline power level where even if you fall behind, she's still going to be useful, and fantastic follow-up if you have a Leona or if you have some of those other champs. She can be really solid, especially against like these three immobile types of AD carries and really, a lot of different champs. Obviously, you don't want to play her into Samira because Samira can pretty much win wall your arrow, and that's bad. Now, if people take Cleanse, that can be bad news bears for Ashe, but it means that they're not going to have heal, so you could have the potential to kill them if you have an all-in lane early. So it's possible Ashe might deserve to be just a little bit lower, but I still think that she's going to be a really strong candidate just because of how much utility she brings to the role if you can manage to position well and stay alive. Okay, and then Aphelios. Now, this is the ultra high skill cap champion. You really have to prep and get your timings for fights and make sure that you're showing up with the right guns. So you have to understand, okay, Dragon's up in 1 minute. I need to make sure that I have, my white gun ready for Dragon, or my red guns. I don't remember the names of all of them. I think Severon's the red one. Crescendum, I think, is the white one. But you need to try to time your guns and time your fights so that you have the proper guns for the proper situation. But he, obviously has a ton of utility. He can engage and, start a team fight with his purple gun, his Gravitum, really, really good against melee champions if they get at his face with Severum and Crescendum. He can take over early if you use the sniper rounds really well, if you use his range. Scales super hard in team fights later. Yes, they did change Kraken where it doesn't interact quite as favorably with his Severum, but I still think with Crescendum you can trigger it a ton. I think you get a lot of extra effective attack speed off of that. So he just brings a lot to the table. He's still confusing for a lot of enemies, so they're not really sure what your threat level is. You can catch people off guard really well. So he's the 500 IQ ADC, and he has been picking up a little bit in pro, although his win rate's still not phenomenal. He's going to be a strong champ. So you have to play him well, but I think if you do go for Kraken into, I think he does Hurricane after Kraken or Collector. I'm not 100% about his build, but I do know that he definitely has the potential to go off if you're really good on him. But you got to have that skill level there. Let's see, yeah, Hurricane into Infinity Edge. So I don't know if he'd be a Dom's kind of guy. I don't think he's done that as much in the past. I know he does get some free flat pin if that's what people opt for. I don't know if people are doing the flat AD or the flat pin these days. But that could be something that's pretty decent. The Collector actually has a much higher win rate than Runin's Hurricane right now. I think almost everybody should go to the Collector second, honestly. Like, it really doesn't even matter what your champion is. The Collector is just, like, really broken, and you need to get it even if it's not great on your champ. Is sort of my, general vibe. And then I guess Infinity Edge is what most people are doing next, or maybe some kind of lifesteal item. So, obviously, I'm not an Aphelios, specialist, and he has been out of the meta for a while, and, I haven't seen a ton of him with the new items, but I have seen some situations where he has been really strong, and he has been picked up in pro a little bit, which means the potential is there if you can execute it properly. And then Tristana is probably the most underappreciated ADC in solo queue right now. She has the highest win rate of, like, mainstream ADCs, like a 54% win rate, and she just brings a ton to the table. She's excellent with the Halo Blades Kraken build, because Kraken, obviously the third hit you do that bonus damage, but with your bomb you want to attack 3 times really fast as well, and then that stacks your bomb up so you can get those resets. So Halo Blade works extremely well with her 3 hits, with the bomb, and with Kraken. So it just synergizes really well with a lot of other items that are out there, and I think people have been running Storm Razor second so that you get that slow on your first auto so they can't run away as easily. So that you get your bomb fully stacked. That's the reasoning behind Kraken, behind Storm Razor, I believe. Although, once again, I'd be curious to see how Kraken's looking as a second item. And there it is. Kraken actually is a percentage higher because it's an OP item. Even though Trist loves attack speed to get the bomb stacked up, it just doesn't matter. Kraken's just OP, so you have to get Kraken. Or, the Collector. So anyways, there are several different options. She can be really strong. Now, is she going to like something like, probably not a shield bow champ. No, shield bow is really bad, so those changes aren't going to matter. But maybe getting more Doms as like a third or a fourth item might be something worth considering. Right now, it looks really bad as a third item pre-buff. So we'll see. But yeah, super strong, great to jump in, does a lot of burst damage. Her ultimate does like 300 damage at level 1 for some reason. Shows she's just has some of the best burst all-in champion. Now, she doesn't have any setup. That's the thing, is like Misfortune with her make it range in with the W, Senna with her W. All these other champs have setup for your support to make sure that they have a really strong engage. So she doesn't have the setup, but she has one of the best follow-ups, right? Even at level 2, if you just jump in there with your W, you throw your bomb on them, whenever your Leona goes in, they flash her, they're dead. That's it. Like, almost nobody is going to be able to beat her in the early game. Assuming that your supports are putting out a similar amount of pressure and damage. So, really good. And then once she gets ahead, it's impossible to get away from her. She just jumps on you out of a bush or something and you're dead, right? If you're the enemy AD carry, she will just blow you up. And she gets those resets so she can jump in, get the kill, and then jump back out. Or she can keep just, bouncing around, killing everybody. And she takes tower plates really quickly. So if you get ahead and she pushes in a tower and starts dropping bombs on the tower, she can take those plates really quick. And she scales super well late game with her Q attack speed scaling. So she's really good into tanks. Really good against divers because she can use her R to knock people back. Great at taking barons. Starts to get really long attack range at later levels. So she's just fantastic. So why isn't she S tier, you might ask? Well, she can't manage the wave very well. And that's why you don't see her a lot in pro, because she has to push with her explosive shot. She can't turn it off. So that means that you are putting yourself at some additional danger, and people might be able to freeze you out, especially at higher elos. Or if you get pushed in, then those explosions are going to make it very difficult for you to last hit under the tower, because it's going to do uneven damage to a lot of the minions. So she has a hard time managing the minions early, although she does have very good wave clear if left alone with her bombs and her explosive shot. It's just in the very early laning phase, especially kind of the higher the elo goes, where wave management matters more and more and more, she starts to have some problems. And she is kind of short range, right? Like, yes, you can jump away, but you're still opening yourself up to getting harassed by the Seraphine or the Lulu, or engaged all in, by the Leona and stuff like that. So part of it, if you're facing an engaged champ, is how well can you buffer your W. Because if you start your rocket jump and then someone CCs you, like a Nautilus hooks you or something like that, right when you're about to jump, or even a Blitz hooks you, you're still able to jump through that. It's a very strange mechanic on her W, so you have to practice her a lot to get good at that. But if you can get good on that, if you're really good at buffering your jump, she might even be all the way up at S tier. So I think she's very, very underrated right now, very strong. It's just a lot of people don't play her to her full potential, and that's why I have her down a little bit lower. Speaking of that, we have Samira here, and I do want to finish up in the next, 5 minutes or so if I can. I know it's a meme, so we're going to go through as fast as I can. I think Samira, so if Trist is the most underrated ADC, or certainly one of the most underrated, then Samira has to be one of the most overrated ADCs. Her win, now don't get me wrong, the highlight reel, all the YouTube videos where she's getting the pentakills and stuff like that, yes, she is one of the AD carries most likely to get a pentakill, except for Misfortune. Had a double pentakill in the LCS this weekend. I won't say which game, in case you haven't been following it or watching it, but she did very well this weekend. But Samira, only about a 50% win rate, much lower than a lot of her contemporaries, one of the lowest win rate ADCs. And it's just because she requires so much prep early on and just so much knowledge of which combos you should be doing and how you should be managing your cooldowns in order to get your ultimate but still have enough juice left to jump around with your ultimate, make the correct plays. So yes, she does have things that look super powerful, right? Her wind wall, or whatever it's called with her W, is super obnoxious. It's very good against a lot of engaged champs. In many circumstances, it can be better than something like a Civ or Spell Shield because it blocks all projectiles, so it blocks all damage, not just CC, and you can use it to protect your allies. You can protect your support Seraphine from the Ash Arrow if you just walk in front and do your little spin thing. So it's an extremely powerful ability. Her ultimate obviously does an obscene amount of damage if people stay close enough for it. So she definitely has the tools to be very strong. She can gap close, but and the buff to shield bow is going to be very nice. So you could definitely put her in tier 2. And if you're extremely good on Seraphine, Samira, if you practice her a lot, and if it's higher elo, you could even put her all the way up in S tier. But I think that a lot of people just aren't going to use her combos correctly early on. She really lacks in that setup department. Like I mentioned, a lot of these other champs have some sort of setup. She has no CC. She's low range. Her gap closer is okay. She does do a lot of damage later on in the game. She is heavily affected by Grievous Wounds, so if people do start building the Chemtech Purifier, then that could be a problem. Once again, I think the adoption is going to be slow on that, but it is a possibility that's out there. So she's okay. She's really, really good in the right circumstances, but I think that she is a little bit risky, especially if you're not sure if you're how your support's going to do. If you have a knock-up support, if you have like an Alistar or something where you can really leverage her passive, she does get a little bit better. So it's totally possible she could be A tier. It might be one of the more controversial people that I place on this tier list, but the fact that so many people aren't so great on her and her stats aren't looking so hot, I've got to put her down in B. Now, Aphelios, you could say, well, his stats aren't so hot either, so why do I put Aphelios in A? I just feel like he has a lot more utility than she does and a much higher ceiling if he's used properly, because he has so many different tools in his kit, from the engage to the massive AoE damage, to the lifesteal. I just feel like he has a lot more potential if he's used at his highest level than Samira does, although Samira is very good as well. So it's tough. I mean, tier lists are always going to be a little subjective. Some of it comes down to just how powerful, what's the baseline power on the champ, and then some of it is just how good is the champ in one-trick hands. So it's always hard to balance. So you could switch either one of those. I could see the argument for making Aphelios tier 3 and making Samira tier 2, but they're both hard to play, and if you play them correctly, they're good. Okay, Lucian is another one that, for some reason, he just kind of has a low win rate, hasn't been that good, although I think a lot of the items are optimized really well for him right now. He obviously triggers Kraken really well. I really thought that Essence Reaver was going to come up and be really strong on him. Turned out to kind of be wrong on that. Seems a lot of people don't get it on him. But I think it just comes down to he's fairly close range. He doesn't have any utility, right? Like I mentioned with Samira, if you get behind, you don't have slows, you don't have stuns, you just don't have a lot of setup for your team, and you're close range. You can ult to get a little bit more range out. You don't have any AoE damage. Samira at least has AoE, right? If she's channeling her ult, she can blow up a lot of people, so you kind of have to take people down one-on-one. So he's okay in the right situation. He's an excellent lane bully early, but a lot of these champs are going to be great lane bullies early, but they bring a lot more to the table later on. So anyways, he's okay, but I have him a bit lower. And then Vayne, this one might be a little controversial. You know, I could see some people putting Vayne in tier 2. Her win rate is going to be a little bit higher, but the main issue with Vayne is she doesn't bring anything to the table, and she's not that great in the early game. So she doesn't have the CC, she doesn't have, you know, the setup or any of that stuff that I just mentioned, but she also doesn't have a lot of burst. Like Lucian, at least if he gets a hold of you early and gets those combos with press the attack and off of his first item with Kraken, you know, he can blow you up really quickly. But Vayne doesn't even have that. She requires a lot of auto attacks. That's pretty much all she is. If you're a really good Vayne player, yes, you can use your Condemn to keep yourself safe from a lot of the engage out there, but it is really brutal. Now, if she does get to 2 or 3 items and she's very good at positioning, then she's incredibly difficult to stop later on in the game because she's constantly going invisible, constantly repositioning. So she is very, very good, especially against melee tank, you know, types of champions that are trying to dive her. Just because her Q is such a low cooldown, she's one of the best at kiting. So definitely has the potential, can be very strong. It's just you're pretty much conceding the lane if you pick Vayne. There are very few matchups where she's favored, like Ezreal, maybe like Sivir or something. But overall, extremely weak early. You're very heavily relying on your team to carry you for the first 15 to 20 minutes until you come online. So potential, but I would probably play somebody else. And then Twitch is, if Twitch goes unchecked, he can be one of the strongest AD carries in the whole game because he does have the invisibility to sneak up on people in solo queue and get a ton of free kills. Nobody ever respects the invisibility. So if he gets ahead, he's one of the best snowball champs in the game at assassinating people. And then he also is very, very good at team fighting. So if he has the proper peel and protection and he just opens up in a team fight, it's just over. If he has 2 or 3 items, he can just delete entire teams. So he definitely has an extremely high ceiling. If he gets ahead, it's just he can be bullied out early, kind of like Vayne. He doesn't bring a lot to the table. Now, I will say the slow is definitely relevant on his cask, and if he gets to stack that poison, he can do some pretty decent burst. So in all-in situations, right, where your Leona goes in and you drop the cask on somebody and you just start auto-attacking, you might actually be able to kill him, especially if you take press the attack on him. You trigger the press the attack and you've got 6 stack of poison and you contaminate, yes, he can do very, very well. So he's kind of an odd duck where he's not that great at small trades, but if he can stay, you know, clear and not get chain CC'd, then he is pretty decent at all-in trades in the early game against some of the other AD carries out there. Now, is he going to walk up and do that to something like Jhin or Misfortune? Probably not, but he might be able to all-in someone like a Kai'Sa early if he doesn't get isolated missiles and doesn't get hit with a W. So he definitely has the potential there. Excellent if you put him with something like a Lulu or a Yumi or something like that, and he makes it through the laning phase. The scaling is tremendous on him. So, you know, don't underestimate him. He's one of those, he could very easily be AE tier if you have a duoed support that's going to help protect you. And then Seraphine has kind of been rising up in popularity. She is getting nerfed a little bit on this patch. I still think she'll be an okay if you want an alternate bot lane, if you just need some magic damage down there, or you have a lot of other damage dealers on your team and you just think that it fits if you have a, you know, team fight comp. If you're an early pick or something like that and you want to flex her to AD carry, you don't want the enemy to get a hold of her mid lane or support. In the right situation, she can be good. She'd be a lot better with like an organized team, like Flex or you know, something like that, or if you at least have a duo or something that's going to work with you. But excellent at starting fights and follow up, you know, with her R, great spamming and, you know, lane control early, really good if you have a, you know, poke dominant support in the bot lane. You've got like a Xayah or Lux or something like that. She can be very good. Obviously, the damage is going to be lower than some of these other hyper carries, but if your team already has enough damage and you just need more utility, I think she's the supreme utility champion bottom. Obviously, going to be a lot better if you have a support with you that's not going to get Staff of Flowing Water or Ardent Censer or Moonstone. So she's really good with non-enchanters. So if you have like a Leona or Nautilus, I know I just mentioned like Lulu in there. I wasn't thinking. Poke champs are good, but you want to be the person who's getting the Moonstone if your team really wants a Moonstone. Okay, and then the last few here, and then I guess we'll try to keep it under 40. Hey, that's better than an hour though, right? I'm getting a little faster. It's going to be Jinx now. I think that Jinx is okay and probably a little underrated right now. She just doesn't do like a lot that's really special, right? Like she's kind of okay at everything. She scales really well. She has very good team fight, but I think she just requires a lot of items. Right now, it's like she really feels like a 3-item champ is where she comes online, and a lot of these champs are just so deadly off of 1 item or even before they get a completed item. They just have so much base damage in their kits right now. Now, she's okay. She does have her Zap can actually do quite a bit of damage in the early game, and then her Rockets for later on can do pretty well. She can wave clear with Rockets early. It does respectable damage. Chompers are decent follow-up. I wish they weren't on a 24-second cooldown. Seems a little ridiculous. I wish it was closer to 16 for level 1 Chompers, but it is what it is. So she does have some follow-up, right? So she can't really start fights super well. If you hit the Zap, it can set up your Leona or your Nautilus. So if you're accurate with that thing, it can be pretty good. And then you do have the Chompers. If they land the CC, you can chomp them, do a lot of damage. Obviously, Snowball is really hard if you get a kill or an assist and you start running around. So she definitely has a high ceiling, high potential, but she doesn't have any mobility that makes you extremely vulnerable. Gale Force does help a little bit with that if you want to go with Gale Force, which is probably the play. She is getting buffed. I think she's getting like 50 extra range with her rockets. Maybe it's just 25 range. There she is. So she's getting, yeah, an extra 25 range on the rockets. So that is definitely relevant in team fights late game. I mean, maybe that ends up making her OP. So I could definitely see an argument for, you know, moving her up to B tier. Or maybe if you have the right kind of protection, you know, if you have a really good Janna player on your team that's helping you out, you know, maybe she could even go all the way up to A tier. If you have some Supreme Peel and a good sort of front-to-back team fight, she does not want to skirmish. She does not want to get flanked. She wants, you know, an offensive line in front of her, and she wants to be the quarterback, you know, just chucking bombs, right, on people. So she requires a little bit of setup and a competent support to be okay, which, as we all know, is kind of, you know, it's kind of a dangerous situation to be in solo queue. But in the right circumstances, she can be really good. Now, Xayah is another really high skill cap champ. I put her in, you know, sort of the Aphelios type of zone where she has a lot of tools that can be really strong, but you got to get your geometry right. You got to get the feathers correct. Now, I do think that Gale Force has a lot of potential with her because you can reposition off of Gale Force and then trigger those feathers to make sure that you get that root. Her big issue is that her ult is just on way too long of a cooldown, the 160 seconds. So if you do go for Essence Reaver second, I think that she's probably the biggest mainstream person who benefits from Essence Reaver. And she did go up a little bit on this patch, I believe. But she's still just too hard for a lot of people to play. Now, if you do have a Rakan on your team, obviously she's going to get a little bit better. But yeah, Essence Reaver and Gale Force. I feel like Navori Quick Blades is kind of a trap item. And I'm kind of wondering, you know, would it not be better just to go for like Halo Blades just so you get the feathers on the ground faster and then you go for that root early on so that gives you more power in the early game? I'm not an expert on that. What's the win rate on that? I think I looked at it and it was bad. Halo is 52.4. Hey, actually, I'm right. Look at that. TSB knows a thing or two. So that actually is a really good build that a lot of people aren't doing, and it just makes sense because you want the 3 feathers down so you get the root immediately, right? Like, it's cool and everything if you get more feathers with lethal tempo, but fights usually don't last that long. Like, you need to kill somebody quickly. As Xayah, so I wish more people would do kind of the hail, and then Taste of Blood can help you out in the laning phase. And then I think, now a lot of people are doing Ravenous Hunter, which I guess is still pretty good too. That Omni Vamp does help you out in the laning phase. I kind of wonder if Ulti Hunter, I think I saw a pro do this, maybe a Korean run Ulti Hunter. That might have been secondary. But either way, that would help out a lot because your ult brings a lot to the table. It saves you. It's your get out of jail free card, not only for, you know, when you jump, but then whenever you root, it can, you know, stop a whole team from coming at you. And it blows everybody up with the roots. So, the Essence Reaver was actually really good on her with Gale Force and Collector. The problem is you want all of those items. I think Quick Blades is a trap. It does have a high win rate. I mean, The ability haste is really nice. It's just, I really wish this item said 20% of your total cooldown on the item. But because it's remaining cooldown, if you already have a low cooldown, ability, then that can be a little weird. Or if it at least affected ultimates. It'd probably be broken if it affected ultimates. But I wish it would do like normal abilities and then 20% of total cooldown refunded. Because sometimes it's really good if you just use the cooldown and you get a crit, but then sometimes it feels really bad. So she kind of needs multiple items. I feel like right now she needs at least 2 with Gale Force, and she kind of wants Essence Reaver, right? Like Collector is super good, so she's not a fantastic Collector user. So she kind of wants crit, she kind of wants lethality, she wants attack speed. Like she just kind of needs a lot of stats, but I think she has a lot of potential. If you're good, if you can land those roots in the right kind of comps, especially if you have a Xayah or a Rakan or something like that, I think that she can be good. Okay, last couple here, and then we'll go ahead and call it a day. We'll keep it under 45. Only 3 times what I was hoping to do. There's just so much to talk about. But anyways, so Draven is, I still think he's okay. It's just he doesn't have a great mythic, right? He wants to really just blow someone up in the early game. So something like Eclipse could be good on him, but it has been nerfed over time. Obviously, Shield Bow can be good, and that is getting buffed, and that is nice, because he does get a lot of benefit off of lifesteal, because his axes can lifesteal, but the bonus damage on the axes cannot crit. His main problem is he has very, very little setup, right? He does have his stand aside, which is okay, but not fantastic at setting stuff up. If you hit it, it does slow, which could set up a Nautilus or a Thresh or whatever, but long cooldown, very situational. And he does do a lot of burst damage in the early game, but he has no AoE and very, very limited CC. So he is good against the single targets, but there's a lot of stuff that can blow up single targets, right? It's like, why would you want to pick Draven over something like Jhin or Misfortune or Tristana? It's like, there's a lot of champs that can blow people up right now. And they just work way better with a lot of the common items. Because like attack speed, like Hail of Blades, Kraken and stuff like that doesn't work that well on him, because he really just wants to like just blow him up off of 1 or 2 hits. So maybe there's some combination of items that people just aren't getting on him that could be good. And it's not like he's terrible. I just feel like he really runs out of steam if you don't get those kills secured in the very early game. Now, I still like playing with Dravens in general, but it's mostly because of their mentality, because they go and they want to get kills. Now, I know Dravens are sometimes known for being toxic, but that's why there's mute chat. I can deal with that. If somebody just wants to talk some trash, I can mute that. But I can't make people play aggressive and follow up when I'm trying to take over a lane early on as a support, right? So I would much rather have someone with a really aggressive mentality that's going to be ready to follow up when I want to go, when I want to try to make a play. They're ready for it, and they really want that kill, right? So sometimes it can backfire if they chase too hard and they're going under tower and stuff like that. But I'd rather have somebody that's going just a little bit too hard than somebody that just sits there and watches and never does anything. So anyways, Dravens are usually aggressive, and that kind of mentality, because they want those kills. They know they need those kills to snowball. And that in and of itself can be good. However, I'm still going to have to mark him in C, even though they usually can have what I think is a good mentality for trying to dominate lanes. And then Ezreal I have down here. You could very easily put Ezreal maybe as high as like A tier right now if it's a very good Ezreal player. Mana Immune did get nerfed a couple of patches ago, which was one of his bread and butter abilities. And Ravenous Hydra is getting nerfed on this patch, which had been replacing Blade of the Ruined King in a lot of circumstances. But he did get a direct buff on this patch, and people are still finding ways to be useful on him. So he's okay. If you're playing weak side, if you need to play something that's very safe, if you're good on it, if you can constantly hit a lot of your Qs, he does bring good utility. Now, he doesn't have the slows or the stuns or whatever, but he can play so far back and constantly poke. He's very nice, especially if you have a roaming support, an Alistar, Leona, something like that wants to run around. He's going to be farming by himself in the bot lane. He's going to be one of the best at that. So there are certain comps where he can be very good, especially if you're proficient on him. But he's extremely difficult to play. Probably, I think, the hardest AD carry to play at a fully optimal level. Maybe, like, Aphelios is close, but he's definitely going to be really far up there. And that's pretty much it. The last, there's a couple that I'll mention here. I have Caitlyn super low here just because I think there's so many other options if you want the early game bully. Most notably, Senna is just a much better version of Caitlyn. But then something even like Ashe is pretty long range in the early game. Aphelios with a sniper gun is long range. So if you want the long-range poke, I'd rather play that. Caitlyn is all right if you're constantly landing your combos, but she's an extremely difficult-to-play combo mage. You have to be landing your traps, and just getting a headshot is not enough. You have to get, like, headshot plus net Q, other headshot. Like, she has a lot of combos that can be really good, but a lot of people just cannot play her correctly. And if you're just auto-attacking, she's so bad. Like, yes, if you get crits, she'll be okay, but she doesn't have any, like, very much AoE stuff for fights. Her attack speed's really slow, so she didn't scale with attack speed stuff. I just think that just the items and the runes and everything just are not right for her right now. They're just way, way better choices, unless you're just God mode on her. I don't think she's going to be that fantastic. Kai'Sa has been seeing some pro play lately. I think with certain kinds of champs, she can be really good. So, you know, like Taric, I think people have been trying. Alistar classically is okay with her. But the problem is she has to stick a whole lot of her spears and then pull them out. So I just think she's a worse version of Twitch right now for solo queue. Because both of them want to build up. But I just feel like he's going to spike faster. And he's got the invisibility and the long range and the, you know, fantastic team fight. Now, she does have the repositioning. So she is a lot better at kiting stuff like Olaf, kiting stuff like a Udyr running at you. But, I just think that she falls off a little bit too hard in the late game if you're not really fed. It just takes too long to do her damage. You know, she just doesn't have any burst, so she's okay. Sivir, I thought was going to be a lot stronger, but it turns out that she's not. The Essence Reaver just really didn't matter that much. Her win rate's not, like, impossibly bad, but she does have very good wave clear. It's just her mana costs are so exorbitant in the early game, and it just her cooldowns are very long, and she's short range. So she can get bullied out. Now, she is good into stuff like Bard, Leona, Nautilus. Like, a lot of these engaged champs with the spell shield, she is kind of a pest. I just think that she just doesn't do enough elsewise to help out. Her ult is very nice with, like, Darius and Olaf and all those bruiser champs. So she's got the tools. I just think the numbers aren't quite there. If they lower the mana cost on her W again, if they just made it scaling instead of 75 flat at level 1, if they made it like 45 and then plus 5 per level, or even plus start at 40 and go plus 10 per level, that'd be better. But her mana costs are just too high, and you just can't access high quality mana early. Yes, you can get tier. Yes, you can get mana immune, but her W doesn't apply on hits. If it applied on hit, or like some percentage of on hit, that would also be extremely good. If it applied like 25% on hit on the bounces, but as we stand, people are going to be really tempted to get tier on her, and then it's just going to slow down her build. She just doesn't have a great, you know, first couple of items, I don't think. Kog'Maw, same thing, just really hurting for an item right now. It's like, what do you get on him? I guess you can get Shield Bow. It's not fantastic. They just don't have a lot for these kind of like mage on hit, you know, type of builds. Champs that don't really want crit that much. So historically, he's gone like Blade of the Ruined King into Ginsu's, but you just got to get a mythic in there somewhere, and he just doesn't have it. I guess you could do like Gale Force. So he's all right, I guess, but he's just a sitting duck. If you want to play something that's immobile and just, you know, try to completely take over the game, I'd rather play something like Jinx, because she just works a little bit better with some of the items out there if you want the immobile hyper carry, or even better yet, Aphelios. Varus, I think, just got kind of gutted. I think they buffed him either this patch or last patch, but it doesn't matter. The rework just doesn't make a lot of sense. They want him to be like this spell-slinging mage, kind of like a Lucian, but he doesn't have the mobility to make that kind of build work. So he's just kind of dead. And then Corki, I almost forgot he was a champion until I was doing this tier list. Sometimes he's used in the mid lane as a counter to things like Sylas, like there maybe Azir or something. I don't remember all the counters, but in like pro play, there are some situations where he might be all right. But in the bot lane, it's just not working. He just doesn't have any attack speed modifiers. His spells are expensive. They're on really long cooldowns. He's just very, very outdated. Like, it's kind of a cool kit. I like the idea of a auto-attacking magic damage user. I think that's kind of fun. But to my knowledge, he just does not have a great build. Maybe there's something I'm not thinking of out there. Maybe he's like great with Essence Reaver or something. But I just think that it's just not quite there. Although it's sad because he's a cool champ. He's just so obscure right now. And then that's going to be it. So thank you very much. I guess we kept it under 50 minutes. So we kept it under an hour. We kept it under 50. Let me know what you think about this new format. I was trying to cover as much data as I can without getting too lost in the weeds, looking at the wiki and the abilities and having this I tried to add this visual representation up here for you so you can kind of follow along. So let me know what you think. I'll try to continue narrowing down or whittling down to eventually get under 30 and then maybe under 20, maybe under 15 at some point, but I don't want to sacrifice the depth of the content because I think that's what a lot of people like. So I'll try to figure out how to talk faster and how to, just be a lot more linear as I keep cranking out these tier lists. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and we'll see you right next time.